So hi, I'm Brad. Welcome to another episode of Coffee for Closers. Today I'm on site here at Smart Partners in Kinshasa with Jason DeLuca and Paul Roberts. Guys, thanks for having us out here again.
Thanks for coming out.
Obviously, we've been out here before. I think most people that follow us know who Smart Partners are and what you guys do. But maybe what they don't know is what all this is, right? And this is part of Smarter, Faster Games KK.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is really what I wanted to dive into and talk more about is the gaming, which is training and mentoring game. But Smarter, Faster Games, I'll let you explain. It's more about training or gaming or both?
It's both. So originally, I've been doing training out of the business for like 15 years. And a couple of years ago, when I was building some tools for a workshop called The Complete Skilled Recruiter, I wanted to have some kind of a game to go along with the workshop. And so I figured, of course, there's all kinds of recruitment training games online. I figured I would buy one and then just roll it out and use it. And I went on Google, looked around, couldn't find it, asked friends who were in learning and development, and everybody's like, nope, never heard of it. So I just said, you know what, I'm gonna have to make one. So I went off, I started studying about board game design, and I even hired like a professional board game designer to kind of coach me through the process. And I just made one. It took a long time, but I think the effort was worth it. So.
I mean, that in itself is amazing. Like, who goes out and studies about board games?
Well, yeah, but again, yeah, but just being in workshops and stuff and having facilitated them for as long as I have.
Yep.
Like, there has to be something to kind of break up the monotony of just telling people what to do. And you can do some role plays and it's kind of nice, but I wanted to create something that, and I think it's some of the notes, but like, I wanted to create an analog simulation of the recruitment business.
That's
from
awesome.
Top to bottom, something that a company could put down on a table, and everything from, doing an assessment center for people who've never done recruitment to skilling up people in the business to run 4 or 5 people at a time, or even to take some people who are first-time managers to sit like where I'm sitting now, and then manage 3 or 4 or 5 people through the business of recruitment in this game. And the other thing is, it's a simulation, right? It's just a game. So if you make mistakes, if you give horrible answers to some of these event cards and stuff that happen, or if you lose a bunch of placements and whatever time is allotted you miss, there's no damage. Because as you know, the current state of affairs with recruitment training often is you have a module organized training regime, but in between that, it's just go on the desk and just try to figure stuff out. And so I wanted to have a safe place where people could do that. So, yep.
Okay. And Paul, what's your kind of connection with the game and the company?
So I've been working on and off with Jason for 20 years. So I met Jason in 2001 as a candidate.
He got me my first job.
I took him for an interview, failed, and then we hired him out of pity a couple of weeks later. And I haven't been able to escape him since. So I've been working with Jason mainly in recruitment, obviously, IT recruitment. And then when Jason started working on the games, asked me if I wanted to kind of lend a hand. So in some ways, I'm a kind of sounding board to Jason's very creative ideas. And what's the correct number of wizards to have? Who knows? But just kind of working through a lot of the content with him in terms of the event cards and these kind of things. And then, helping, delivery or sales of the product too.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's definitely an applicable game, right? And I mean, I've known you for a while, right? We've talked about this game a lot, but more recently, I've actually played it, right? And, when I first saw the game and the concept and you were totally passionate about it, right? I was like, okay, it's wizards, it's witches, it's witchcraft, and it's a recruiting-based game. Okay.
There's no witchcraft. Pay attention. So the idea is that, if we made a game that had accountants, IT, server network engineers, and solutions to engineers, right? No one's going to want to play that, right? The other thing is that if you're doing it as an assessment center for people who've never done recruitment before, it doesn't take a long time to explain to people, here's the healers, here are the wizards, here are the warriors, and these are the builders, right? The candidate cards, the candidates on the game, there's 4 levels. So you have entry level all the way up to expert level. And then of course, male and female. And of course, when you look at the card art and stuff, it's people from all over the world are represented. So that's why we said it in this, and you had brought that up before, which was a good point. Like, if we made this a map of Tokyo and we did it with real positions, it would be like, oh, this is great. You know, it just adds a little bit of fun to it.
Definitely.
It takes it away from work.
There you
It
go.
does. No,
Thank you,
it
Paul.
really- it really
for
does.
correcting me.
Yeah, no, it does. And it you know, I mean, you can do that with role plays, but even role plays, just the word itself is very painful, right? But this is something that really does escape. And that's what I saw. I mean, I'm not kind of the fantasy type of game type person, but when I started looking at these cards and you put everything together, it's like, holy cow.
Yep.
You just created a recruitment training game.
Yep.
That anyone from zero skill to 25 plus years
Yep. They can
play.
there's something that they can get out of it. I mean, for example, we were talking before about just about the event cards. So you've got client, you have client issues, things that happen with the customer. You have internal issues that happen within the company. You've got deck for candidate. You have interview related issues and stuff. And then of course we got these wild cards, which are just super random knowledge-based questions about everything from HR to running a recruitment business to all this kind of stuff. When the senior people will look at this and say, oh, well, yeah, this is for more junior people, then we hit them with a bunch of these cards and they're in front of other people, it gets interesting.
Definitely. I mean, when I came out here with one of my researchers, Gail, she just jumped right on it. Like, it took a couple of cards to understand the concept and stuff, but then you pull these cards and you get these situations. And then, as a manager or, as kind of a mentor or something, you see how people use it. And then, oh, that could go this direction or this direction, right? And then you want to get that answer from them and say, oh, that's a good answer. I never would have thought of that.
And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
There's no answers on these cards. So, I mean, I'll just give you, just pull what,
yeah,
right?
All right. So we'll just walk them through. So this is a client card.
This is a client card.
Okay.
It's a client-related
And
thing, right?
this is going to be, I'm just going to read this. This is a homework hero. So you were able to prepare a few specific questions for your first meeting with a large client. Okay. So
Yep.
what do I do with that?
And then that's up to the senpai, the people in the company and stuff. Because for example, a much larger recruitment company might have processes for what you're supposed to do before you go meet a big client, right? Or before you go meet a customer at all. And that's the other use of these cards. Sometimes there's problems that come up in the cards.
Right.
And when I'm coaching with a client or something like that, you could literally just put it up on the whiteboard and be like, what kind of SOPs, standard operating procedures do we have to even avoid that happening in the first place?
Right. And that's what I really liked about it, right? Is it's conceptualized as this game with this, this land, but then you bring it back into reality and apply it to real life recruiting terms, or that specific agency,
Yep.
or even the industry.
Yep.
Right. And then even going back to some of the jobs, we pull some of the jobs. This is a battle priest. Okay. But you restrict it into what a priest actually
Yep.
does, right?
Yep.
So the job opening is, it's a high priest with 16 plus years experience. That's what they need. The requirement is vampire knowledge, of course, realm protection. Okay. Preferred spells, heal major wounds, cause fear, inspired prayer. All right. And the pay rate is 800 to 900. Right?
Yeah, and so before it goes too nerdy and then everybody tunes off and says, oh God, what is this dorky stuff? I'm not bringing this into my company. You can ignore most of that and then just say, look, 16 plus years of experience is required. And then when you go around the board and start finding various candidates, you're like, oh, this person's got enough experience. Or they have less experience, but maybe they have one or two of the skills that you're looking for, just like in real life, right?
Yeah.
So one thing about this game is everything is here on purpose. So even the fact that it's a big map,
Yep.
I didn't want it to be like, the size of a postcard. So like 8 people would be all around this like little tiny board. It's like, who's going to want to play that, right? What happens when the board gets bigger? Now you have to plan your time management because you have to do it under some kind of a time limit, right?
Right.
Just like life. So it's like if you don't have any jobs and you got a bunch of candidates, so now you got to go off and meet clients. Well, if the clients are at the far edges of this thing, you've got to roll the dice, you've got to make your way over there, and you've got to plan this right? So,
And walk us through just briefly what we're looking at here, right? So basically the object is you roll the dice and you pull the cards that come up, right? And we've got a key here, and you're trying to get jobs, you're trying to get clients,
Yeah. So I mean, but again,
and you have money.
yeah, and again, you just real quick, you have the map here. This is the entire game area. These castle towers here, these represent the clients, and the clients are located here on the map. There's an entire facilitation guide and student guide and a story guide that we had written that has kind of a backstory about how all these different kings and queens and chiefs and stuff like interact with each other. They have different things that they need. Yeah. Right? So the idea being is just like in real life, you should read up on a particular client before you go to visit them, right? So anyway, we've got dice. Yes, you roll, you move your piece around, and every time you land on a particular square, then you have to do what that symbol is. And then inside the facilitator guide, we've got what those corresponding squares are. So you pick one of the event cards, or you get one of these, which is a 20-sided dice. You roll that, and that's when just a crazy random event will happen. It could be anything from you get a really good candidate, you lose a couple of candidates, you get a bunch of jobs, you lose a bunch of jobs, just stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, bringing it back, like what getting back to the industry and what's kind of missing in the industry right now is, obviously a lot of people are remote, right? You lose the internal banter when everyone is in the office. Inexperienced recruiters don't hear people on the phone anymore, right? They're not getting that, right? So I think something like this is definitely in demand. I mean, what's your take, Paul, on like where do you think kind of mentorship or leadership in recruitment kind of went during COVID?
I was thinking on the train coming up here how difficult it would have been for me to join the industry in a work from home environment, because I've learned so much to either listening to other people and on the desk, on the calls, or being able to talk to people and ask advice from your boss or a senpai or a colleague very easily, kind of face to face. Maybe different tools or things may come out to solve a lot of these problems, but they exist at the moment. So I think also a lot of people learn, on the job rather than through any kind of formal training. Smaller companies may not have training divisions or trainers and so on. If they're getting training, they're bringing in trainers, and often the training is kind of do this, do this, do this, do this. So it's very prescriptive, not necessarily in line with how the company would normally do things. So afterwards, you've got maybe the manager saying, actually, we don't do it like that. I think this kind of learning style, as Jason said, there's no right answers. This generates conversation. So you're shrinking a lot of on-the-job training into an hour of play.
Yep.
It's also fun.
Yep.
And I think we've worked together. I don't know any recruiter goes, woohoo, training time, and runs into the room. It's you can't get people off the phone, right? So this is actually you get away from the day-to-day aspect of particular, but you're still in the space of learning the business and learning how to perform, and you enjoy it. And a lot of things come up through the conversations with the mentors, with the person, the facilitator running, or just from the teammates. So Jason said, I think very experienced people can pick up a lot as well, because they're going to hear an answer from someone that, oh, why would you do that? I wouldn't have thought about that. And then there's a conversation. And so you're cramming a lot of experience into a very short space of time and enjoying it while you're doing it. So
definitely. And I mean, one thing that I noticed as well is like, you learn recruiting the hard way, right? Like you're going to screw up. What better way? This is a risk-free platform where you have almost every scenario you can think of under the sun that happens in recruiting that you can do without damaging your client reputation or candidates or your own brand, and you can do it here. And that's what I loved about it. Right?
The biggest thing I'm always hearing, and I've worked with well over 1,000 recruiters in this town, both in English and in Japanese. The biggest thing that always is an issue is dealing with fear. And the reason why they sent off whatever the email was, or the reason why they did this, is because they were afraid of saying, I don't know, to the candidate or to the client and someone else. So this gives people a chance to not be afraid and then raise your hand and say, well, if this happens, I don't know what I would do. Right? And the other thing is the best teachers in your business work there.
Yep.
So I tell this to my clients all the time, and some of them say, well, then why in the hell are we paying you money? But when I show up, it's like extracting that knowledge from the people that are already here and being able to distill it a bit and then share it with other people is basically a really good business consultant's job. Some stuff I'll bring from the outside, of course, but you could even have 4 or 5 people play and just have one of the senior people sitting off to the side just to help moderate the answers. Yep. That's fine. And then in the game too, it's not on here, but there's a player journal, so they write down their answers. Yeah. So then afterwards, when they sit down with their management and they cover some of the things that they talked about, it's like, wait a second, well, what was so-and-so's answer, right? Because one of the things I did for one client I was working with, did a card game. We didn't play this full version. We just used these cards. So it was one senior person with a few people from his team competing against other teams with the same card to see who could come up with a better answer. And literally, you've got so many different, hundreds of topics that you can talk about. And it's nice. They got pizza, they got some drinks, and it was like now you're seeing two senpai, two senior people kind of go head to head about their knowledge. So yeah.
Well, and that's that goes back to one of the points that I say that like some people maybe disagree with, but big billers don't make good managers, right? And what happens in recruiters is like they get promoted, they're billing and they get promoted, right? But this is like they can become a mentor, not a manager, right? So you can get that big biller that maybe is not a great people manager, but he's got a wealth of information that in the concept of this game, that can go.
Well, you can put the big biller in this chair, and then he or she can then manage 4 or 5 other people. You say you got 45 minutes, you've got to make X amount of money, you've got X amount of cost per person at this desk, so offline, you're gonna have a budget that needs to be hit. Here's your money, right? This is what you start with. These are how many people you have. You got 45 minutes, go. And the whole time, what happens when they hit an event card? They've got to ask their senpai, they've got to ask he or she, right? And then what happens? Well, this person, the top biller, also has to bill. So they've got to move throughout the map and do their business, respond to their event cards, right? It's a bit hectic. And so for some people, it's a good chance to give them a deep dive for an hour or so to see how they would handle that themselves, right? Stealing something that Paul said the other day. Oftentimes, top billers don't know why they're top billers. And this also gives them a chance to kind of look at stuff and they might think, you know what, I might be a really good manager, or maybe I might not be. Maybe I'd be more happy doing something else, right? The other thing, we talked about this offline, when you're interviewing a senior recruiter, maybe from a competing agency, look at your recruitment process. What kind of questions are you asking? Well, you could now sit with them and give him or her a bunch of these different event cards. Each manager that comes in to interview, they can just give some different cards and start to see a pattern of their responses, right? If you might just say, we only care what they're going to do with clients. That's fine. Okay, let's just focus on those. And then the managers get together later and say, well, what did you notice about her answers? Well, it just seemed like every time she was in a situation, it was, well, if they don't want to work on this, we'll fire them. But is that the only answer? Well, yeah, but we'll just fire the client, get new ones, right? And if you start to see that tendency throughout their answers, you might think, you know what? Maybe they're not a fit. So, no.
Oh, good points.
Okay.
All right. So, I mean, if a company is interested in beta testing this or doing it, like, how do they get in touch with you and what steps?
Well, I mean, if they're interested in beta testing, they can have me come over and they can do a workshop with it, right? We've tested it a bunch of times. Like I said, we've been using this thing for a couple of years now. Yeah, they can just call me up. I'm happy to come over and run a short workshop and stuff using the game. If they just want to purchase the game, then yeah, I can talk with them offline about that. And it includes training, showing them how to use it and stuff like that. So yeah.
And I know before you mentioned that like some clients requested stuff. I mean, this is also very customizable in some aspects.
No, in all aspects. So if somebody came up to me and said, actually, we don't like the fantasy theme, we'd like you to make it into a map of Tokyo, and we've got 4 different industry specialisms that we want to change all the cards to. I still have access to the original artist. We have all the source file. I mean, we own all the IP for this. So I can completely turn it into a very boring game if that's what they want, right? But right, and we can change all the card backs.
Out of the box is the
yeah,
best.
we can change all the card backs and make it really super serious if they wish.
So obviously this is one of the games that you have. What are some of the other games that you're working on that are in the works that you already have that are in the works that are applied to different?
Yeah, so I've got another game. It's on negotiation, and it's a story-based game. Spent a lot of time working on the backstory, and it's just pretty unique in the way that we've done it, in the way that we're doing the role plays. We've got all kinds of really amazing, like little artifacts for people to do negotiation and stuff. And the story itself was written by a novelist, so we went really deep on that kind of stuff. It's really fun. I mean, so much so that we're going to release the backstory as its own novel, and it's going to teach people about negotiation in a really interesting story.
And that's for pretty much any industry.
That's for any industry that has nothing to do with recruitment. Another game that we're working on in a pipeline now is a sales and account management game. Again, has a really great backstory and some other interesting stuff. And another game I have, which is about building your business in Japan, and it's based on ramen. And you have a ramen shop, and you got to make it work. And we've got all kinds of industry experts and stuff working with us on that. And finally, I don't know if we'll be able to get to it this year, but I want to do a stand-up comedy game to teach people about presentations and overcoming their fear of public speaking. So, yeah.
Nice. Great stuff. Well, Jason, Paul, thanks for having us out here. We are going to dive into components of the game a bit later. But for anyone that's interested in the games or training or just in general, please reach out to Paul or Jason. And yeah, stay tuned for more great content from Smart Partners, Smarter, Faster Games, and Coffee for Closers. Thanks for watching. All right, so well, let's do that. Let's just jump into the game, show us how it works, and then yeah, show everyone how it works and is applied. So.